Welcome back to you with Steve Price on Friday nights. Now, filling in for Chris Kenny yesterday, I made the point that the organisers of the Australian Open need to rethink their attitude to Australia Day. It is the Australian Open after all. Can you imagine if the US Open, and it doesn't, but imagine if it fell on the 4th of July? Do we really think Flushing Meadow wouldn't go into Patriot overdrive? Or if, say, and it doesn't, the French Open happened to be on Bastille Day? I just asked, why is Craig Tiley, the boss, and his board headed by airline CEO Jane Harlicker, so afraid of celebrating our National Day? Well, I'll tell you why. They are terrified that the radical vocal left will attack them, so they stick their heads in the sand. They hope that no one would notice. Look, they've got First Nations Day, which I think is very appropriate. They've got LGBTI plus Day and even a beer day celebrating an Italian beer brand, Peroni. On top of that, we had this morning the ludicrous spectre of a centre court match wrapping up at 3:40 a.m. There was still contestants there, spectators there, can you believe that? Some are labelling it utter madness, me included. Now, this is the second year in a row a match has finished past 3:30 in the morning. Joining me now as a Friday night regular, former professional tennis star and Liberal youth and sports spokesman, Sam Groth. Great to have you in the studio.
Steve, good to join you.
You were there last night. You didn't stay till 3:40, I hope.
No, I certainly didn't. I was there for a period of that match, but yeah, I got out of there just after midnight. Got home at a reasonable hour.
What's the answer to this?
Look, I'm not sure there's any clear answer for it. We've seen Tennis Australia take on an extra day, starting the tournament on a Sunday, which some people have seen as a possible answer. Others have seen it as a way to just bring in more revenue for the event. We've seen record crowds throughout the week so far. But you know, sometimes you get a back-to-back matches where you had a male match in the afternoon that went long, followed by the first women's night match, and then Medvedev going 5 sets. Look, no one wants to see tennis that late. It's not good for TV. It's not good for the spectators. And it's also not good for the players who have to back up in a day or so. Medvedev's going to be really struggling.
Well, we'll talk. It's great talking tennis, but we need to talk some politics because of your role as sports spokesman. It was revealed this week the Victorian government approved a secret taxpayer-funded bailout of Tennis Australia. Now, that was on the eve of the last election. I mean, I think the number is now up around $100 million. Why was this money handed over to Tennis Australia, and has the Labor government, in your view, given us a proper explanation as to what happened here?
Well, look, let's be clear. We're very supportive of the Australian Open and the economic benefits that it does bring to Victoria from a tourism and from a jobs perspective. But this payment only come to light through FOI requests put through from the leader's office, through John Pizzuto's office. And had those FOI requests not gone in, this payment would have never been known to the Victorian taxpayer. This was at a time when Tennis Australia then went on to post a $62 million surplus in that year. We still don't have a clear answer as to why that payment was made. And I think this is just what we see from the Allan Labor government and from the Andrews Labor government prior to that. It's all about secrecy. It's all about doing things that they want without any accountability to the Victorian taxpayer. And at a time when our debt is at the extreme levels that it is, you've got an event in the Australian Open and with Tennis Australia, they're commercially viable. And I think that anyone could agree. Look, if Tennis Australia, after the pandemic, needed some assistance to keep themselves going, the public would be fine with that because the event is a great event. But the government shouldn't be hiding behind secret payments that only come to light through these FOI requests. Well,
particularly when you're given, as you said, the budget deficit in Victoria is horrendous. I mean, we paid $380 million, us taxpayers, not to have the Commonwealth Games, add $100 million to Tennis Australia. There's nearly $500 million with someone just writing out cheques and not explaining it.
Look, it's clear they can't manage major events, and I have the events portfolio as well as amongst the others that you mentioned. And you look at the Commonwealth Games, over $600 million. That's going to cost us, from what we know so far.
You reckon it'll be 600?
Well, that's what we're at now with the payment of the contracts, the tenders, the cancellation, which was $350 million in itself. So we're up over that $600 million mark so far of what we know. You add this to the $100 million that Tennis Australia has received. Now, they're going to play that off as the extension of the event. We know the event's not going anywhere.
Well, the other one too that we should remember is they re-signed the Grand Prix contract when they didn't need to and gave away the actual rights to the Paddock Club.
Which is incredible. That's the huge revenue maker, isn't it, for Formula One? For anyone that's been to the Grand Prix, that Paddock Club experience.
They can't run major events, as you said.
And we need a sustainable major events calendar. We've always been that events capital of Australia, but it's got to be value for money for the taxpayer. There's got to be a return on investment. And as you would see, through what they've done now with Tennis Australia, what they did with the Grand Prix, these major events are holding the government to ransom and the government's caving in.
I want to talk about the Australian Open. I mentioned that I mentioned it last night when I was filling in for Chris Kenny. It seems like they've gone very woke over this decision to snub Australia Day. They've had a First Nations Day, and I think that's great with Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley there, a superstar champion. But there's Pride Day, there's All Abilities Day. Why can't we... I mean, in the past, and you'd remember this, they used to induct Australian tennis players into the Australian Tennis Hall of Fame. Yep. And this year it's Leighton Hewitt with a bronze bust, but they've moved that back to the 24th of January. Now, you wouldn't get a more, apart from you, I wouldn't get a more Australian bloke than Leighton Hewitt. What's their problem here?
Oh, it's a good question. Look, Leighton's a good friend of mine. I've played a lot with him. You wouldn't get someone, as you said, who's more patriotic and playing for their country. Look, personally, we'd like to see Australia Day celebrate the Australian Open. As you said, there's nothing wrong with celebrating all of those things that they currently do.
Right.
And tennis has quite often led the way in its diversity and inclusion space, not just here in Australia, but across the globe. But that doesn't mean you do so at the expense of our National Day. We'd like to see it celebrated. And the reality of it is the eyes of the world are watching us. Australia Day falls towards the climax of the event. The world wants to see, and I think we should have the opportunity to showcase, who we are as Australians. And if there is this debate around Australia Day, which there seems to be every January that comes up, no one's presenting an alternate date at the moment.
No.
So while they are, it is where it is. Let's celebrate it. Let's acknowledge those people that need to for what it was. But we should have the ability, our national tournament, the Australian Open, on the global stage, to see the Australia Day celebrated. And if that's through a flag-raising ceremony and the induction of someone into the Australian Tennis Hall of Fame, which happens to be late in this year, I think that would be an ideal way to be able to celebrate our national.
You played tennis around the world. I mean, I made the point about,
Yep.
if the 4th of July happened to be in the US Open, it's not. Can you imagine what they'd be doing in New York or in France on Bastille Day?
It'd be incredible. And look, I will say, my proudest moments while tennis is an individual sport have been able to showcase myself as an Australian playing in Davis Cup, playing in the Olympic Games. We are, as tennis players, quite patriotic and proud to be Australian. I'm sure the Australian players would love to be able to celebrate.
Look what happens when the Davis Cup's on and how proud the tennis players are to represent their country.
Yeah.
Just finally, Jacinda Allen, the Premier, she today's poured cold water on the Australia Day parade being reinvigorated. It was dumped last year, won't be on this year, and I suspect it's gone forever. There's another. Look, if they don't want Australia Day, what these Labor administrations need to do is go to the Australian people and say, do you want to shift it?
Look, we've seen polling come out recently that backs Australia Day and most people support it. We saw the voice go down this year. Look, people aren't buying into this ideology, I believe. There is a small number of people who believe that it should be changed. But look, Jacinda Allen, as the Premier, she has the power to back in an Australia Day parade. We saw record crowds prior to COVID and people really celebrate it. She put it back onto the Australia Day Organising Committee in the City of Melbourne. Again, zero accountability from the Premier, zero accountability from this government. And as you said, if there is a desire to change it, put it to the Australian people and let them make a decision about how they want to celebrate our National Day.
Great to have you on the Friday night team. Can Djokovic win again?
I think so. He's got to be the one to beat. But I tell you what, Yannick Sinner, the Italian, he was very impressive today when I was over there.
Some great tennis. Sam Groth, thanks for having us, coming and joining us in the studio. We'll see you on a regular basis on a Friday